Hello and welcome to today's webcast, Trailer Manufacturing Inspections, the Smarter Way Forward. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software, and I am pleased to bring you our presenter today, Rich Kerr, who is a solution specialist here at Alpha. Rich is going to show you how technology can be used, hey there, Rich, in the trailer manufacturing space to do inspections, and he's going to demonstrate what we have done and how possibly this type of technology can be used to improve your own business. So let's get started. How's it going, Rich?
I'm well, Dave. Thank you so much
Excellent.
for having me on.
Great. I'm just going to drop off camera, and I see that we're already looking at your screen here. It says list of forms there, just so we're on the same page.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for confirming that. So welcome, everyone. We really appreciate your attendance, and we're super excited to share with you some of what we've put together for quality control, quality tracking in the trailer space. So what you're looking at is a projection of my mobile device. It's a standard smartphone, Android phone. Our platform does run on iOS as well, so this could just as well be an iPhone. I'm going to go ahead and click the button that says add a blank form. So the idea is that if I'm working on the quality team and I'm about to do an inspection, I'm going to use one of the various inspection apps that we've put together. I'll go ahead and click add a blank form. And what you'll see is the various department level quality check applications we've built. So for this particular customer, there's a paint department that has their own app. The assembly inspection team has an app. The assembly line lead, the daily defect team. There's even an inspection app for incoming materials, load photos when the trailers are being loaded and sent out for distribution, stack sign off where the trailers are being stacked, and the washer titration log for checking the consistency of the chemical makeup of the washer solution. And we've just recently added a new one for some of the sub departments. I'm going to go ahead and dive in and show you what our paint department app looks like. So again, imagine I'm one of the quality team members. I'm going to tap there to launch a new instance of the application. Now, one of the things that our customer asked us to do was make their forms bilingual, as they have a number of workers in the quality teams who have English as their second language. So if that were me, I could tap Espanol, and you'll see that the form is now in Spanish. For our demo today, though, I'll leave it in English. By default, it's got my name and the current date and time already populated into those first two fields for the inspected by and the date and time of the inspection. So that's an optional feature that was asked for, so we implemented that. We want to indicate what shift I'm working on. So I've got what we call a button list. So if you've got a short list of options, rather than doing kind of a traditional drop down of options, we can actually do what's called a button list, and then it just makes it very easy with a single click without having to hit a drop down and then subsequently make a selection. So in addition to button lists, we also have standard data entry like type in fields. So you see I've got this part number field where I could just go and type in a value, and that'd be one way of doing data entry. In some cases, this company has a barcode affixed to their product. So if that's the case, we might want to scan in the barcode. So there's a separate field for doing it as a scan. So if that's the case, then I can use my camera to scan in a barcode, right? And that will simplify the process of getting that number in accurately without having to type. There we go. So that does a scan, and I just had a water bottle with a barcode for our demo, but you can see the idea. It scans it in and we're off to the races. So we can type in a description, a job number. We also support a variety of ways of doing conditional data filling. What I mean by that, if we take a look at this section called chip test, this is where we're checking to see if there's any chipped paint. If there is chipped paint, we have failed the test and we'll choose no. So when I choose no, meaning we didn't pass the test, I'm then prompted to add some additional information. We can say chipping found on undercarriage or something to that effect. Now, if we pass the test, we simply would choose yes, and we don't have to have that additional data. So we can make the forms intelligent in the sense that they will provide additional data entry fields based on values entered as we go along. There are a couple of other sections on this form that are very similar, where we're checking for whether or not the ball was installed correctly for attaching to a hitch. We also have the ability to do standard checkboxes, right? So like you might see in any application, we can do a checkbox data entry. Here we have another free-form field for notes. This one is set as a multi-line field. We also support speech to text. So you'll notice as I talk, it's being converted into text very rapidly. So that cuts down on the amount of time to do a narrative in a text box like this. I'm still amazed at how fast that goes, and I love the accuracy, right? So if I don't want to, if I have something really descriptive I need to say, I can use our voice to text feature. Here you'll see the ability to indicate whether or not the quality of this trailer meets our standards, and I can mark it as complete. But I have two other standards, scrap or rework. So again, we can choose one of those options to indicate the final or the initial disposition of this trailer manufacturer. Now, let's say there were some issues that we wanted to address in more detail. We can add an image to accompany the data. So when I tap add image, I can now say tap to capture image and actually take a photo of the trailer, right? So then I just use my mobile device's camera. I take the image, and one of the things that we've provided when it comes to imaging is the ability to mark up the image. You'll notice a little pen icon in the lower right-hand corner. So I can click there, and I now have a zoom window that I can move around on the main image until I'm focused on the area that might be an issue. Then I can select a pen color and thickness. Maybe I'll leave it on red, but go with a slightly thinner pen thickness, and then I'll go and draw a circle around the area that I wish to highlight. You get the idea. You can mark up these images to help call attention to some problem areas, and now that becomes part of the data that you're saving. And I can add a description along with that photo to enhance or further illuminate what the problem is. You're not limited to just one photo. So in this instance, we're allowing the ability for multiple photos. So you'll see after taking the first one, I can just go add another if I like. I can continue doing that as much as I want. If it turns out I didn't need the second or third image, I simply delete it and it'll confirm and I'm off to the races. So this is an example of what's being used in the paint department. There's another comments field. There's also the ability to indicate whether or not the paint department has noted any issues that might have occurred in the fabrication or weld departments. And so if there are any fabrication or weld issues that were noticed, then that gives us the opportunity to indicate that in some additional data capture elements. So in essence, we're opening up an entire new section of the quality check process depending on what the user notices in their inspection. If there are no fabrication or weld issues, we don't need this section. So they choose no, and they don't have to do that. So this cuts down on the amount of visual data that the user has to sort of digest and sift through if it's not necessary. Once that data has been filled out, the user will tap the submit button, and that then loads to the server, including the images, and then they're off to the races. Once that load is complete, they can go and do another one and move on to the next step in their process, or just do another inspection. Okay. And we're all done. You'll see it has a little lock icon on it because that's already been submitted. So that's just one of our quality apps that we've done in this space. I'd love to show you another. I want to pause and see if there are any questions as we're going.
Right now, it doesn't look like there are questions, but we didn't actually let people know that you can enter your questions. So go ahead if you have any. You could type them into the chat box or into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel.
Great. Thanks, Dave.
Yep.
I'll go ahead and add another blank form. So let's move on to a different application. I'm going to move to the one called the daily defect audit. Okay, so The daily defect audit, like the one that we saw already, does have the ability to toggle between English and Espanol. Here we have an indication of which facility the inspection is being conducted within. So you've got 3 different locations, and then again, the shifts being first, second, or third. We can indicate a trailer number if that's relevant for the inspection. And then we're just going to go in and add a defect. And so because I chose Mexico as the facility, you'll notice the defect is listed as Mexico defect number 1. Within Mexico, I'll indicate whether or not the defect inspection was noted in the yard, outside of the warehouse or production environment, or within the facility. So we have yard versus production. Again, we have part number, defect source. Now, you'll notice defect source has a little red asterisk next to it. That means this is a required field. So I've got to select what the defect source is. There's some internally used codes for the defect type, as well as some more easily recognizable departments that could be selected that might be the source of the defect. With those required fields, if they're not filled in and you try to submit, the user will be flagged that the form is not complete, and they can quickly jump to the areas that need completion. Okay. Just like before, there's an ability to scan in a VIN number. You can scan it or type it in. We've got some additional criteria about the disposition of the trailer, and then the ability to add multiple photos. So similar in some ways, but just with a focus on some different aspects of quality. This particular form also requires a signature. So we'll tap to sign, and then the inspector can sign their name to the inspection. You'll notice that at the bottom of the signature capture field, we've got an automatic date and time stamp. So that information is also captured during that process. They will go ahead and submit that. And again, it gets loaded to the backend server, and it's available for download later, or the data can be looked at via a dashboard to show some KPIs and aggregate information. I'll go ahead and show one more before we take a look at what our dashboards can look like. So I'm going to say add a blank form. And I'm going to go to the one called the washer titration log. Now, the washer titration log, a little bit different. I mean, there's some similarities, of course, language selection, current date and time. There are 6 stages of analysis of the solution being used for washing the trailers. Stages 1 through 6. The first stage, called the acid stage, I'll go ahead and select that. And you can see there are 4 data elements that have to be filled in. The acid measurement needs to have a measurement of between 4 and 8, and we have that in the description. If I enter a value of, say, 7.5, well, that certainly falls within the 4.8 range. However, if my measurement yields a value that doesn't fall within spec, say 9.2, then the data shows up in that red backdrop to flag the information so the user's attention is called to it. This kind of conditional formatting helps us to ensure that we maybe haven't made an error in our data capture. We didn't do a data entry error. It's going to cause us to look at that number again. We could go even further. Like you saw in the previous application, we might require the user to enter an explanation. We might ask them to do a second level test with an additional field that can pop up. So there's all sorts of things we can do conditionally based on the value that's entered. I'll go ahead and enter the pH level. It's got to be less than 2. So we'll put a 1.5, and that works. You'll notice, by the way, for a numeric field, we provide a digital keypad, just a 10-digit keypad to make data entry super easy. Let's go with the pressure measurement. We'll say it's 12 psi. That's within spec. And I have one more to go, which is the temperature. And the temperature measurement does not have a specification range. You'll notice after filling in all 4 required values here, I now have a button to return me back to the menu. So it's a way of guiding the user through the data entry process visually. They're now aware that it's time to move on. So we say return to menu, and there's now a check mark on the acid stage section because that's been completed, and I'm ready to move on to stage 2, which is called rinse, which has some different measurements. Some of them have ranges that are set, some of them do not. Okay, so I think you get the idea here. We're capturing these values, we're flagging them as being within or outside of spec or tolerance, and that can really improve the quality of the data that we're capturing. As the user would move through this, each one of those stages will be checked off, and so they know when they're all said and done, and they can go ahead and submit that inspection, just like we've seen with some of the other applications. I'll pause for a moment while that's loading. We can see that there's 3 that have been submitted, and I'd like to maybe segue over to show how a manager or a team lead could look at this data in aggregate. So I'm going to move my phone projection out of the way for a moment here, and we're going to go ahead and launch into our website where this data is managed, and we call that Transform Central. Okay? So you'll see my web page here, and you'll see at the top part of the web page there are some tabs that allow us to move into different sections. We'll focus on the home section for right now. On the home section, you'll see a tile that represents the various apps that are part of our organization's collection of quality control apps. A couple that we played with already were the paint department. We also did the daily defect audit and the washer titration log. If in your environment you want the user doing the inspection to be working from, say, a laptop, or if they were even at a stationary location, they can use this to actually launch the data collection process too. A moment ago, we looked at the washer titration log on my mobile device, right? So as a way of refresher, this is what that looks like on mobile, right? So it's got that kind of vertical format. It's more tall than it is wide. But let's say we were working from a laptop or a desktop, we can actually do a new instance of any of these apps right here. So I'll click Fill New Instance, and it will actually load a version of the same form, actually, just now in a bit of a wider format because I now have much more screen real estate. But everything else about it works the exact same way. You move through the process the same way, the same data collection process happens, the same quality checks and data validation elements are in place as well. So you can save from here, and you can actually load the photo or load the application directly from your web browser here. Okay. Now, when we're done loading, I'll move on and show you some of our dashboards, because part of the process, of course, is data capture. But once you've got all that data captured, what does it mean from a trend standpoint? What's the movement of the data? What are the trends that we're seeing in terms of potential quality issues, and how do we address those? So we'd like to see this data in aggregate. Let's take a look at one of the dashboards created for the paint department. In fact, the paint department has 3 separate dashboards that have been built. It's one of the more active departments, and there are a few different ways they'd like to look at the data right off the bat without doing any filtering or adjusting. So I'm going to click Go to Dashboard on this paint department scrap and rework dashboard. So we'll click Go to Dashboard. That will launch it. And when that data loads, you'll notice data organized into different tiles of information. If you've ever built a dashboard using other products, some of this will be familiar. I'm going to zoom in just a tad. So you can see at the top, I can change which shift a collection of data I'm looking at. So for example, if I want to see the rework or scrapped trailers that were noted by the first shift, I'll click first at that little filter button at the top. So it'll limit it to those records. So the first shift has marked 41 trailers as being scrap or rework. Okay. We can also filter by job number. If we had a particular job in mind, we could put that in as well and choose yes, we'd like to filter that way. These 41 instances are illustrated in a few different ways. So we've got the total number. We also have the list of people who did the inspections. And then we also have the data broken out into these different columns on the column chart, broken out by month. So we can see there were 11 scrap or rework inspections from the month of January. There were 4 in December. November had 1 scrap and 2 rework. So we've got the stacked column effect there. Let's go ahead and click on the 11 from January. So when I click on that part of my my chart, it gives me this drill down where I can now see the individual records. Okay, because we've got X amount of horizontal space, you make a decision in terms of which fields you'd like to see here. So we've got the disposition, rework versus scrap, the job number, the date, part number, the status of the form, whether it's still in process or it's been submitted, the username, image, etc. So let's say, for example, I want to take a closer look at some of this inspection work. So I'll come down to this one, and I'm going to take a look at this photo here, the second one, and we can see that's the more detailed view. If I want to open it in a new window, I can, and I can look at it with much more detail. Okay, this is done on someone's smartphone, and these smartphones today have very high resolution, so we're getting some very good quality photos during these inspections. Again, another example of a photo that I can see, oh yeah, there's definitely a paint issue there. I don't have to be a quality expert to see that that might be something that needs to be addressed. And so we can close that down. And in addition to this row by row view, which is pretty powerful. Oh, look, a number of photos on this one. But in addition to this row by row view, I can choose to show the form contents. This gives me a virtual representation of the form that was used in the production environment. So I can see the data that was captured by Sarah as the inspector. I can scroll through and look at the data this way. Yet again, I can click on those photos as they appear if I want to, and do some kind of drill down if I like. I also have the ability to edit, right? So if I'm a manager who's been granted that level of access, I could edit this data even though the form's been submitted, okay? In addition to looking at the data in this format, I might decide that I want to do some ad hoc reporting in another product. So let's say I wanted to move these 11 records into a different format for, again, additional analysis or reporting. I'll choose this check all link at the top left. So you'll notice that each one of the rows has a check mark for selecting. So now that I've chosen check all, they're all selected. And then to the right, I have the option to export the checked forms. When I choose that option, I get some choices in terms of how I'd like to export the data. I can do a list view that looks just like this, like we saw in the initial view of the dashboard's details. I can do the form view. This will allow me to download it maybe as a PDF, and I can either just store that on my network or print it. So I have this, as another way of having a view of the data. I can also email this data in this format, right? So I can enter an email recipient here and send this data to them. We can also even go to the tables view, which allows us to export this into a tool like Excel if I wanted to run some pivot tables or some other type of analysis using that tool. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of looking at the aggregate data in a dashboard, then drilling down on those records, and then if I want to move that data to another platform for additional analysis, I can do so. I'll also mention that during the process of using the mobile app, when that user hits that submit button, when they're done collecting that, right? So I'll minimize this and bring up the mobile view once again. When they're done with that data collection and they hit the upload or submit button, however you want that to be labeled, in addition to that data moving to the backend database, we can route the data into other systems. So we can take advantage of what's called an API, an application programming interface, that will allow us to send the data into your ERP systems or accounting software or some other database where you'd like to see the data show up. So we have that additional level of flexibility where the end users don't really have to think about that. They just tap the button to send their data, and then it's routed in a variety of different directions to go into other systems or even routed to other users. So let's say you had a supervisor who needed to review the data done by the first line person. So part of that submit process could involve hitting this, and then behind the scenes, it goes to this other user and it will appear on their mobile device for them to either audit or sign off on, etc. So I know that's a lot of information in just a short amount of time, but I wanted to make sure we got sort of a top level overview, Dave. So I'll pass it back to you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Rich. If there are any questions, now would be the time to ask them. You can type them into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel or into the chat window. If there are no questions, that's okay too. If people do have questions after this webinar, who should they send them to? What email would be good? So I'm sending
They
to
can,
you, Rich. Yeah,
yeah, they
whatever.
can send right to me, rich.kerr, Kerr, at
Great.
alphasoftware.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you very much, Rich, for presenting. We hope to talk to you soon if we can help you out. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.